Okay, hello everyone. Now we're going to skip back to activity one and look at trophic structure. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. This will be a extremely quick activity. So when we look at trophic structure and food webs, when we see the word trophic, it relates to food or nutrition. And so here a food chain shows sequence of food transfers between trophic feeding levels of a community. The arrows indicate the direction of food or energy flow. So plants and other photosynthetic organisms are considered producers because they are capable of converting energy, usable energy, to food, or they create usable energy through photosynthesis. So, like I said, this would be plants. It will also include some bacterias and protists or plant-like protists that we discussed when we discussed the different kingdoms. So these are considered our primary producers. And then we move on to our herbivores. So our herbivores are animals that eat plants and are called our primary consumers. So they will eat plants. And then we move on to our secondary consumers. Our secondary consumers are going to be animals that consume the herbivores. And then this hierarchy will continue through to the top predator. So our tertiary, or even here it shows the quaternary. We really just talk about tertiary in this lab manual. So our tertiary consumers, which are usually the top carnivore, and they will eat the secondary consumer. So these arrows indicate the direction of energy flow. So the herbivore gets its energy from the plant, the carnivore from the herbivore, this carnivore from this carnivore, etc. So in your lab manual, it gives you different, it allows you to create different food webs, and it gives you these small ecosystems. So it gives you the different animals that you could use in a marsh, desert, woodland, or prairie. So I'm just going to give an example of the marsh. I didn't make it as complex as shown in your lab manual. I just picked one example for each group for producer, primary, etc. So here I use the cattail as the producer. So the producers create usable energy through photosynthesis. Remember, the arrows indicate the flow of energy. So the primary consumers use the energy from these cattails. So the primary consumers um, are any animal that eats plants. In the lab manual, it gives an example of crickets or grasshoppers. The cricket eats leaves and other um, plant parts, but no other animal, at least not intentionally. The animals that consume these herbivores are considered secondary consumers. So they eat these primary consumers. The example given in your lab manual of a secondary consumer in a marsh ecosystem is a frog. So frogs eat a variety of insects, one of which is a cricket. This hierarchy will continue to the top predators. So an example of a top predator, so our tertiary consumer would be a marsh snake or a hawk, and they eat your secondary consumers. So, as I said, the energy will flow from producers to primary consumers to secondary consumers to tertiary consumers. And then all of these contribute to decomposers. So, all of these will contribute energy to the decomposers, and the decomposers will recycle this energy back to the producers. So, the all living material dies. Um, So ultimately, all living material is going to die and must be broken down. This job is going to fall to the decomposers that essentially recycle those nutrients back into the system for the plants to use again. So this is a very simplified version of it. In most cases, you could imagine that animals have a variety of prey. So that this means that within a community, there will often be a network of interactions between the organisms found there. And this is what is referred to as a food web, a network of interconnecting food chains. In the real world, these are usually very complex because, as you can imagine, um, a hawk will consume a chipmunk, a goose, various sources of or various animals. It's not, and as you can see, the grizzly bear will consume the chipmunk, the deer, berries and flowers, so even plants and seeds, etc. So they don't have just one food source in the real world. They have a variety of food sources, and this will range from, as shown here, as from carnivores to plants and seeds. So many consumers feed on more than one trophic level. So your job is to create a food web. So you will choose one of the communities shown in your lab manual. My lab manual is page 180, but I believe your lab manual is updated, so it's different. So you will choose one of these and you will create your food web. You don't have to draw pictures, but it's really fun and it's helpful if you do. So like I said, you could choose from marsh, desert, temperate, woodland, or prairie. And that is it for trophic structure and food webs.